Hey, Ray, welcome to the E9 podcast. I was not going to record this week. It's a vacation week. I'm in Key West, Florida with my wife. Mike is recovering from the member. We're going to talk about that next week. He should probably unpack some things. Probably for his own mental health, there's some things he needs to share with everybody. But beyond that, I probably thought this would be a slow week. And of course, every time you think that, it's not going to be a slow week. So I'm going to take about 5-10 minutes, little mini podcast, talk about golf this week because I think it was a really important week in golf. It starts out with the news that the Live Tour, not surprisingly, has lost their affiliation with the Asian Tour. If you've watched any golf news at all, you'll know that the Asian Tour has signed I'm not going to say a lucrative agreement, but one that is extremely beneficial to them as far as a feeder circuit to both the DP World Tour and the PGA Tour starting next year. The reason this is big news is because the DP World Tour and the PGA Tour trying to find a way to, if not buy into or buy out Live, to find a way to kind of box them in. And they did that by affiliating themselves with the only circuit that had given the Live Tour permission, the ability to feed into their system. That was the Asian Tour. It makes sense. Live Tour was very smart and strategic in doing that. They kind of cornered the Pacific market, specifically tournaments in Southeast Asia, in Australia. But now, with this new deal between the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour, Live is left without a feeder system, which, that was one of the things that was really, really controversial about Live, is there's no way to earn your way onto a Live team and onto the Live Tour. And now, with the Asian Tour gone, that's what they use to validate themselves when it comes to a feeder system. Now, with that gone, it really removes any sort of connection that Live may have had to professional golf tours worldwide. It also releases that into the PGA Tour ecosystem, which I think is personally really healthy for the state of the game. Again, I think Live has been responsible for a lot of damage, but also a lot of good that has come about in the game of golf. I think, Brian Rowlap is a very smart and studious sports executive, and I think he found that the way to build his brand was to grab a global market share. And to do that, he had to pull away from Live. But in doing so, with the Asian Tour disappearing from the Live, I don't want to call it an asset, but the list of, Live possibilities for rising players, he has essentially cut them off and removed one of the great bargaining chips that they had with potential investors. So going forward, it's going to be really interesting to see what Live looks like. I think, despite what a lot of people say, I think there will be a Live Tour next year with much smaller purses, a much more limited field. I'm not sure if the team aspect of it exists. I do think there's enough interest in Australia, South Africa, even England, after we saw this last week, where Lucas Herbert won in England. I think there's enough possible interest to keep that tour alive, but is a very, very minor player in the world scene. And to that end, I would hope that the DP World Tour and the PGA Tour, the PGA of America, would allow Live some grace in terms of participating in, if they are eligible, players participating in their events. That's to be seen. But I do think the buyout of the Asian Tour, absorbing that into the DP World and the PGA Tour, I do think that's the last nail in the coffin for Live. So we'll see what this looks like in a few weeks. They've already talked about canceling the team event in Michigan at the end of the summer. That's definitely going to happen. I mean, if they've canceled the tournament in Louisiana, they're definitely going to cancel the one in Michigan. So I would say there's probably 2 Live events left, and then it's going to be interesting to see what happens to big name players, right? The Bryces, the Rahms, the Cam Smiths, the Dustin Johnsons. I think there's some big questions that they have to ask themselves and have to be answered by the PGA Tour, but it's also kind of an end of the road for the middle of the pack players, the Taylor Gooches, the Lucas Herberts, who had a great week this week, um, and then some of the older players. I want to throw in Abe Answer and Joaquin Neiman too. I don't know what happens to them, but then some of the older players too, who are trying to find their way into the senior ecosystem. If you're looking at guys like Poulter, Lee Westwood, Paul Casey, I just think it'd be really interesting going forward. I think the absence of Phil Mickelson from that tour this year has been a very, very bright red flag for them. And I think there's certainly things going on in Mickelson's life that have precluded him from competing on Live. But I think if anybody knows what's happening on that tour and can read the tea leaves, it is him and his camp. And I think his absence, even in spite of his own personal issues, is very, very telling. All right, let that aside. It was almost a year ago, almost next week, that we at the E9 podcast had forecasted Jackson Koivun's ascension to one of the greats on the PGA Tour. He was 20 years old at the time. He was still at Auburn. He was competing as an amateur. He was finishing as an amateur consistently in the top 25 on PGA Tour events. We even tweeted out last year that he will be the next great American, that the path to major championships, to Ryder Cup spots, to President's Cup spots is going to have to go through him. He's going to establish the bar. I'm not going to say anybody laughed at us because it was, who knows? It was a crapshoot at that point because you had great players, young PGA Tour players, amateur players, guys like Luke Clanton, guys like Gordon Sargent, who you're like, okay, what does this really, really look like? The Neil Chipleys of the world. But we stood by the fact that Jackson Koivun was the future of American golf. He is in his fourth tour event as a professional. He won the 3M tournament in Minnesota, the TPC Twin Cities. He did it incredibly convincingly. He did it playing against the best player in the world, where he held the lead all day, shot a bogey-free round 66 in the final round. Look, I'm not going to ask you to go back and watch this whole tournament. I'm sure a lot of you who have listened to our podcast, who follow professional golf, probably didn't watch much of the 3M this weekend. But if you want to, and in fact, I encourage you to do this, go back and look at his second shot on the 12th hole on Saturday when he was 2 shots out of the lead. I think maybe 1 shot of the lead. That was established by Scotty Scheffler. Look at maybe Scheffler was going to make his run for his first win this season since the Amex. And Jackson Koivun hit a 309-yard 3-wood to 10 feet and made eagle and took the lead, a lead he would never give back. It was an incredible shot. It's one of, I think, the shots of the year. It was an announcement shot. It's the type of thing if Tiger had done when he was Koivun's age, we would be raving about it. Instead, I think there's a semi-justified, cautious optimism about Koivun. But I'm telling you, this is the future of American golf. If we want to have success on the international stage, whether it be Ryder Cups or President's Cups or Olympics, if we are looking for the next superstar in American golf, he is the guy. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about his golf swing. He's incredibly athletic, a lot of club head speed. When you're 21, that's easy. When you're 31, it gets harder. When you're 41, it's really hard to meet, the positions that he gets into with his golf swing to hit the ball the way he hits it. That said, he is, for the next 10 years, going to be the standard bearer for the Americans on the PGA Tour. And that's including Scotty Scheffler and Cam Young and Justin Thomas and whoever else you want to put in that mix. I say this all because I'm very scared that the PGA Tour is going to make the same mistake that the PGA of America made last year in leaving Chris Goddard off the Ryder Cup team. I know he's only played 4 events, but if you don't include Jackson Koivun, who's at 21 years old, much like Jordan Spieth, seemingly the future of American golf, and if you pick the easy road to the team for the President's Cup this year, the guys who may be at the end of this thing, Ryan Gerard, Justin Thomas, and you bypass Jackson Koivun for those guys, it seems like a massive miss, both from a competitive standpoint and from, frankly, a commercial standpoint. Koivun's awesome. He showed up this weekend. We knew he was going to be great. Was it sooner than even I thought? Yes. I really thought about placing a bet on him to win this week, and I lamented that last night. We're in Key West with my wife. I'm like, I almost bet on him. I almost put a nice little chunk down on him to win before the week started, and I didn't. I don't know why I didn't. I don't like betting winners for regular PGA Tour events, but at the same time, it just felt like he is ascending. He finished 10th a week ago. I know he missed the cut at the John Deere, but if you have not gotten a chance to see him play, please tune in when he's in the field. He's a special, special talent. Um, that said, we'll see him again in a few weeks. He's earned his way into the PGA Tour playoffs. I think he's gonna be a factor there, and I am just praying on everything I can that he's going to be on the President's Cup team this year. Again, I don't care about the President's Cup as a competition. I care about it as a feeder system for the Ryder Cup. And Mike and I talk about this all the time. You look at this as kind of AAA baseball. Let's get the young guys some reps. Let's get them on the team. Let's get them some time with the veterans. Let's show them what it looks like to play alternate shot, which they don't do very often, and hopefully start building some momentum for the Ryder Cup that's going to come in a couple of years. Anyway, that said, what an awesome week for golf. Jackson Koivun. And I don't want to throw away the fact that Blades Brown finished again top 10 in the Korn Ferry Tour at 18 years old. It seems like he is just a step or two behind Koivun. And in fact, when he's 19 next year, it may be Blades' turn to start dominating some of these tournaments. I don't think Blades should make the President's Cup this year by any stretch, although I would certainly not be upset if he did. That said, it feels like the future of American golf between Blades, Jackson, as I mentioned earlier, Luke Clanton, Gordon Sargent, Akshay, who's, it seems like he's the old man of the group, but he's only 24 years old. There's a hope. There's a hope there. Did we wish that Jordan and Justin Thomas would kind of mature into more consistent players? Of course we did. And it's not too soon to write them off. I mean, it's not too late to write them off. We think they can still do it. I mean, Spieth is in his early 30s. Thomas is in the early 30s. Scheffler just turned 30. This is a very, very pivotal moment for American golf. We think they can make it. We think they can turn the corner. The President's Cup this year will be a great, great opportunity to show that. And then you throw in some of the younger guys like Chris Goddard, like an Akshay Bhatia. And we might get a real idea of what American golf looks like in the future. From going from a pretty negative place a couple weeks ago, where we watched the Fitzpatricks of the world, Roys of the world kind of dominating international golf, to now maybe there's some hope. Maybe there's a chance that American golf, on the shoulders of guys like Jackson Koivun, could face a resurgence. And we know golf needs its stars. It's something we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast. You've got to have stars in order to sell your brand. And Rolap knows that. He understands that totally. The President's Cup is a PGA Tour property, not PGA of America, which means that Rollup has direct connection to how those teams are selected. I think he's highly aware of how important it is to have somebody with the profile, the charisma, the talent of Jackson Koivun on that team. So I'm really hoping on hope. He will certainly, I'm going to watch the President's Cup either way, but he will certainly give me reason to tune in. And I hope that happens. Next week, we're going to have Mike back. He's got to talk about his member debacle, and it was a debacle by all metrics. It did not go well at National Golf this week for our good friend Pat McGrath and Mike Nealon, and he's going to talk about that. But also, as we get ready to dive into the PGA Tour playoff season, the Women's British Open, all those things coming up, we're going to talk about those topics. We're going to Detroit this week to see the Detroit Golf Club for the last time for the Rocket Classic, which will kind of fold into this second tier of events going into next year, the Challenger Series. I believe that's where 3M is going as well. I don't think we're going to see a tournament on the high end of the PGA Tour next year. I think we're getting some sort of clarity on what this will look like in the future. So enjoy the Rocket Classic this year. I do think the golf course will look amazing. The field is not very strong. And then we're going to head right into the playoffs, which I don't love the PGA Tour playoffs, but I think having Jackson Koivun rise to the top, having Scotty performing so well, not quite getting over the top, I think it makes it very interesting. So anyway, short podcast this week. Next week, we'll be back full pod with Mike Nealon. We're going to talk, there's a few topics we want to talk about. There's some more Odyssey discussion that we want to have. we really enjoyed the feedback we got from our last discussion about Christopher Nolan's latest movie and our rankings of his movies. What we're looking forward to next this year in terms of pop culture and media. Those things are always fun to talk about on this podcast as well. So I hope you guys had a great week. I'm in, like I said, Key West, Florida. Not so far from my home, but far enough to feel like we're in a different world. And just great to check in with y'all. Hope you guys have a great week. Join me and Mike next week as we kind of unpack everything going on the PGA Tour and looking ahead to the rest of the year in movies and television. Have a great week. See you, everybody. Bye-bye.